Hi there, my name is Allison French and I am part of our HR service delivery product team at ServiceNow. And in my role, I really focus on driving adoption with our customers and deeply understanding their use cases. And one of my focus areas is campaigns. And before we get started, I do have this safe harbor notice in my presentation, and that is because this presentation may contain forward-looking statements that are based on current beliefs of ServiceNow and are based on information currently available as of the date of this presentation. And these forward-looking statements involve various risks and uncertainties that may cause actual results to differ materially and should not be relied upon in making purchasing decisions. All right, so next I wanted to start by discussing some quick facts as it relates to campaigns. So first off is that campaigns were first introduced in London, and they are a feature of our Employee Service Center. And next I wanted to highlight just the fact that we do have a more technical name for campaigns, and that is content automation. So if you've ever been in the platform and configured a campaign, you've likely encountered this term, and so I just wanted to highlight that these are in fact the same thing. Next, I wanted to start by taking a step back and really thinking about the strategy and purpose of campaigns, and I wanted to start by reading the dictionary definition of a campaign. So the definition of a campaign is a connected series of operations designed to bring about a particular result. And if you think about this in the context of our everyday lives, you might think of a political campaign or an advertising campaign. And in those situations, that particular result might be election or to purchase a product. But if you think about this in the context of service delivery, that particular result is to stay connected and proactively give employees what they need. And through that, you're likely driving an action, encouraging knowledge article use, and deflecting cases. And if you take this definition one step further and think of it specifically in the context of ServiceNow, you can say that campaigns deliver proactive, scheduled, and targeted messages to enhance the service delivery experience. And to bring this to life a little bit, if you look at the right of this slide, I have some example use cases that some of our other customers have rolled out. So I won't read through the entire list, but you see things like technology refreshes, open enrollment, tax time, change management purposes. And the one thing that's consistent across all of these use cases is that our customers had a need to target very specific groups of employees with information that maybe was phased. And so one of the things that I also wanted to talk through on this slide is just how does maybe what you would push out as part of a ServiceNow campaign differ from maybe what you would push out as part of a marketing campaign, or maybe what your internal communications team would push out. And the answer here is that all of these use cases have a tie back to service delivery, and there is a need to very specifically target your employee groups based on maybe that service delivery event. And ServiceNow makes that possible. The other thing to consider here is that a lot of these things may have a tie back to perhaps an employee to-do that sits in ServiceNow, maybe a knowledge article, a case that needs to be created, or it's just an overall topic that is owned by your service organization, and there's a huge benefit in terms of tying that data together because, again, you're using your service delivery platform for campaigns. Now I wanted to talk through some of the key features and give an overview of them. First, I wanted to talk through the basic structure or architecture for a campaign. So I've populated a very simple example around open enrollment on this slide to help bring some of this to life. So in this example, we are running a campaign around open enrollment. And at this campaign level, we are able to define the audience and the start and stop dates for our campaign. So in this example around open enrollment, our audience might be benefits eligible employees, and our start date might be in October, and our end date might be in November. Immediately beneath our campaign, we have what we call our campaign bundles. And you can think of a bundle as a stage of your campaign. And the two things that are consistent across the items within your bundles or stages would be when that content launches and how long it is available. So in this example, you'll see that we have 3 different bundles. We have an open enrollment webinar bundle, an open enrollment is here bundle, and an open enrollment video bundle. So these all are groupings of content that again have those kind of things in common around when it's launching and how long it's available. Immediately beneath the bundle level, we have our actual content for the campaign. So as you can see here, we have an info session, a banner, an email blast, a couple of other things. And this is the stage at which we can actually refine the audience that we set above. So we said our overall audience for this open enrollment campaign was benefits eligible employees. But let's say maybe the info session or maybe one of the banners is really only applicable to a specific group of employees, maybe HR business partners or managers. That's how you would achieve that granular audience targeting. Now I wanted to talk through what all is possible in terms of channels for a campaign. So on the left of this slide, you see you do have the ability to push out portal content. This is probably the most common channel that our customers are using. And as you can see from the screenshot here, you can display banner-like pieces of content as part of a campaign. And there is more flexibility beyond banner content that you can display on your portal, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You can also push out mobile banner content as a part of our native mobile apps. You can do to-do content. And so just to bring this one to life a little bit, let's think back to the open enrollment example that we talked about before. You could actually assign a to-do for your employees to enroll in their benefits. And one design consideration is that you can actually decide to end a campaign based on a to-do completion. So maybe that to-do is around that particular result for your campaign that you're hoping to achieve. And once that's done, that messaging is irrelevant. It kind of prevents that employee from further being targeted with that message that's now irrelevant. You can also build and create notification content in either the form of an email or an SMS text message. And you can build out employee forum content. And if you're not familiar with employee forums, it is another feature of our Employee Service Center that allows employees to get crowdsourced help and insights from their peers. And so an example of how you might use employee forums as part of a campaign is, let's say maybe you wanted to push out a curated list of posts, or maybe you wanted to schedule a blog within employee forums as part of your campaign. Now I wanted to talk a little bit more about audience targeting and how you can actually achieve kind of that dynamic, very granular level of audience that I talked about before. So you have a couple of different options for doing this. And one of those options is reusing any of your existing user or HR criteria. And one kind of aspect that you might be familiar with that leverages criteria would be knowledge articles. So if you are using the can and cannot read fields on your knowledge articles today, you are likely leveraging criteria to make that happen. Or maybe you already have a piece of portal content that's only specifically visible to a certain group of your employee population. Again, you're likely using HR criteria or user criteria, and any of that could be reused in the content of a campaign. Next, you have the ability to define custom conditions based off either your user table or your HR profile table. And so if you look at the left bottom screenshot here, this shows how that would occur. You're able to use a condition builder to build out your conditions. So in this example, we've built out a condition around location type is office-based. And you can get pretty creative with this depending on what data is available, again, within your user table or your HR profile table. And then ultimately, let's say you actually want to target employees based on a data point that's not available in your ServiceNow platform. You do have the ability to upload an Excel file as long as you have a unique identifier for them with username or email. So the screenshot to the right of the slide actually shows what that process looks like in terms of uploading that file. The next thing I wanted to talk about is how you can actually trigger those bundles of your campaign. And if you think back to the slide that we reviewed that showed the overall structure or architecture for a campaign, if you remember, those bundles really can be considered kind of stages of your campaign. So you have a couple of different options that we can see here. The first is immediate. So what this would do is it would trigger your bundle immediately within the context of your campaign being published and the start date being met. You also have the ability to specify a fixed trigger date. And so this would surface in the form of a calendar picker, and you could choose not only the day, but also the time of day for your trigger. You also have the ability to elect a dynamic date. And so this would be a date that you would select, and you could choose to trigger on, after, or before that date. And just to give an example to bring that to life a bit would be, let's say you wanted to trigger a campaign bundle based off of an employment start date. You could actually choose to offset that by maybe 15 days. Next, you have the ability to trigger a bundle based off of to-do completion. So if we think back to the example that we talked about earlier around open enrollment, we talked about it in the context of maybe ending the campaign, but you can also use a to-do completion to trigger the next bundle or stage of your campaign. And then lastly, you do have the ability to build a condition to trigger a bundle. And so what this would do is you would be able to specify a ServiceNow table and use a condition builder to build whatever condition you need to achieve your use case. And what I would say about this condition option is you may need an additional trigger mechanism, such as a business rule, to make this happen. And just to give a little bit of background into an example use case around this option to build a condition was actually introduced in our New York release because we were building out our parental journey content and we wanted to build a campaign that triggered upon the start of an employee requesting a parental leave. So that's just one option of many of how you may decide to use the condition option. Next, I wanted to very briefly touch on the fact that there are tracking and analytics capabilities within campaigns that you can activate. And this does require the use and activation of a plugin. So on the far left of the screen, you see the Content Analytics plugin name. And that is a basic plugin that is available to all of our customers who are leveraging campaigns, and there's no fee or charge associated with it. And there's also a premium version of that plugin available if you are licensed for performance analytics. And with the activation of these plugins, you would see the ability to turn tracking on for your campaigns. And then the way that would surface you would be able to see analytics within your campaign, within a dashboard, and you'd also be able to drill down into more specific data within a dashboard. And I won't go into too much more detail on the kind of tracking and analytics capabilities today, but some of the resources that I'll point you to towards the end of this discussion do have kind of more information around what's possible and what dashboards are available. Now I wanted to spend some time talking through tips for getting started and implementing campaigns. And the first thing that I wanted to talk through is how to build an editorial calendar and governance plan for the use of campaigns at your organization. And the one thing that I would call out is that this step is not required for your very first campaign. This is more so something that enables the long-term success and usage of campaigns at your group. So the first thing that I would recommend doing is to really organize a meeting with all of your applicable stakeholders, such as maybe internal communications or people from your technology group, or maybe experts from your centers of excellence around benefits or payroll, to talk through a couple of different items. And the first item that I would recommend talking through is all of the different messaging themes for the year and when and how you would use campaigns to complement those. And so the output of this first item here would be the basic starting points for your editorial calendar. So it would basically provide a bird's eye view of all of the different messages that are going out to your employees and highlight any of the cross dependencies between those messages. Then after you get kind of the basic building block for your editorial calendar, the next step would be to really define how the campaign would be used in the context of that message. Will it be the primary communication mechanism or will it be supplemental? And just to give a simple example of what it means to maybe have a campaign be supplemental is I know some of our customers actually outsource their benefits administration to a third party. And along with that, sometimes their communication around benefits would actually be, again, outsourced to that third party. So if we think about that open enrollment example that we talked about before, maybe your third party is actually the primary in terms of communicating the details around open enrollment, but you'd like to use a campaign to supplement and build on to what's existing. The next thing to think about is whether there is a minimum number of campaign audience members to actually build and configure a campaign in ServiceNow. So let's say someone comes to you and they would like to push out a campaign, but that campaign audience is only 10 employees. It's best to think in advance before you roll out campaigns to your organization if there's a threshold for running a campaign. And this will depend on the size of your organization. For some companies, it might be an audience of 50, 100, 1,000, but just think about what's appropriate in terms of time investment versus impact to your employee group for running a campaign. The other thing to think about is who will have that campaign manager role. So who will actually be in and configuring campaigns within your ServiceNow instance. And this can be one person or multiple people. And the thing to know about this campaign manager role is it allows them, of course, only access to configure campaigns and create campaign content. And they wouldn't have access to any other private information on your ServiceNow instance, such as maybe HR cases or IT incidents. The other thing to think about is what are the success goals for your campaigns? In our Orlando release, we introduced the ability to actually build success goals based on either deflection or action. So if we think back to our open enrollment example, maybe a success goal around that would be to deflect cases around open enrollment inquiries by 30% from the previous year. So thinking in advance about your success goals will enable you for long-term success to make sure that your campaigns are achieving goals and driving actions. Next, I want to talk through something that is a bit more tactical, but would likely be required for your very first campaign rollout. And it's the topic of what we call our content delivery widgets. So these widgets would be placed on your employee service center, and these are what would actually allow you to display campaign content on your portal. So if you look at the left of this slide, we have a list of all of our out-of-the-box content delivery widgets. And you'll see there are a variety of options in addition to kind of that banner-based information that I mentioned earlier. So you can see that you can actually push out information via an organizational chart, maybe a video carousel, an event calendar, a list of quick links. And then those bottom three items, welcome banner, styled content, and announcements, are really that more visual banner-like content. And what I'm showing on the right side of the screen is an example of how you could leverage styled content. Styled content was actually released in New York, and it was built with the mindset of the fact that there would be the need to come in and create custom banners without coding knowledge. So you'd be able to come in and create a custom banner with an image and a button and maybe even a gradient, all through configuration without coding. So if you don't already have one of the content delivery widgets on your portal, I would definitely recommend checking out styled content because it is very easy to configure. Next, I want to talk through some of the other steps that would be required for designing and implementing a campaign. And the first phase of that is really defining your requirements. And this can take shape in a couple of different formats, but for your very first campaign, I would recommend hosting a design workshop and thinking through a couple of different topics. And the first topic that I'd recommend really defining is which channels will you leverage as a part of your campaign. In terms of best practices, I would recommend using multiple channels as part of every campaign that you push out, because the broader you push out messages to a variety of channels, the more likely it is to be absorbed by your audience. So an example of that would be, it's better to push out, portal content in addition to notification content to have a broader reach versus just one or the other. Next, you should think about who the audience for your campaign is and whether that should be refined. If you remember before when we were talking about the purpose and strategy of campaigns, how you have this really rich ability to go in and dynamically target campaign audiences, don't lose sight of that and make sure that you're taking advantage of that feature. So think through, as part of this audience, are there very specific granular needs of maybe people within this audience that need a different messaging? So a very common example of that would be managers of people. They sometimes have the need to have access to different information that individual contributors wouldn't have access to. So think very strategically about how you can leverage that feature and really target your messages. The other thing to think about is what bundles or stages should you have as a part of your campaign. So think through those audience members and their personas and how you'd like them to progress throughout the journey of your campaign and what that should look like. So that's really the design of your stages or your bundles of your campaign, and think dynamically about how you could potentially even leverage to-do content to move people along the kind of campaign process if there's an order of events that need to take place. The next thing to think about is really kind of the build content stage. And for this stage, the first thing that you would need to do is actually create your content. So you'd need to create maybe your portal banner content or your email notification content. And once you've done that, you would need to actually configure your campaign and add your content to your campaign. And then as you would with other ServiceNow features, it's best to, of course, test that in a non-production environment and make sure that what you've defined in terms of requirements and built is working appropriately before you implement that in production. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that we actually have campaign-related employee experience packs. And if you haven't heard of employee experience packs, they are actually pre-built content and configurations to help customers. And we have a variety of different employee experience packs that are available today, as you can see on the screen. And we actually have two very specific employee experience packs relating to campaigns. They're highlighted in green, so Health Alert or COVID-19 Employee Experience Pack, and then our Tax Time Campaign Experience Pack. And both of these can be leveraged either in an implementation sense, if you actually have the need to communicate out these messages, or they can also be used for training for your internal team. So if you would like the opportunity to become more comfortable with campaigns and the configuration process, this can be a great mechanism for achieving that. And all of these employee experience packs can be downloaded from the share area of our ServiceNow developer site. And that link is available at the bottom of the screen. Next, I wanted to highlight a couple of additional resources specific to campaigns. So first on the list is a blog. We have a blog around understanding and using campaigns. And this blog is really focused on the use cases and the business case for why you would implement and roll out a campaign at your organization. So I definitely recommend checking that out. We also have an FAQ, and this digs a little bit deeper into some of the complexities and technical questions that you may have as you start developing your campaigns. And then ultimately, we also have a configuration video. And what this does is it shows you the step-by-step instructions for how to actually configure a campaign and it provides a demo of the output of what was configured. So if you've never seen a campaign live and in action, I would also definitely recommend checking out this video. And then lastly, more broadly, I did want to highlight the fact that we do have an HR service delivery community page, which was actually recently refreshed, and it has curated resources across a variety of topics. So I've highlighted the very specific resources according to what we've developed in terms of campaigns, but if you're interested in learning more about Employee Service Center or other features, this is another great resource that you should check out. All right, thank you so much. That was all I had for this session. Thank you so much for listening.